Your videos are a real treat to binge. Sometimes your humor falls a little flat, but your non sequiturs are always... Return of the Obra Dinn is a first-person puzzle game developed and published by Japanese studio 3909 LLC in 2018, a development led by former Naughty Dog developer and now auteur indie developer Lucas Pope, who amassed substantial acclaim and awards for his 2013 game Papers, Please. It was the success of that game that allowed for the slow gestation of his new project, one that was more of a personal wish fulfillment than a marketable product. Return of the Obra Dinn was released to near unanimous praise. Across the board, every major publication was singing its praises. I think there was one Russian site that didn't like the, shall we say, turn the narrative takes. So I'm just gonna up top say spoiler warning, because this game is a narrative puzzle, so anything I say about it is a thing you didn't know about the story. Any bit of gameplay I show you is a thing that happens that you didn't previously know. So throw it up there. Big, bold font. We're talking flashing colors. We're talking lights. We're talking air horns. You know what? I don't want to edit all that. We'll put it up in a very subtle, tasteful, easy to handle presentation. There is a sharp turn the game takes pretty early on, but it's still one that I've noticed does not appear in a lot of material shown in other outlets, so I'm assuming it's meant to be a twist of sorts that the creator might want to remain a secret to unsuspecting players, and I think there is some value to going into the game without knowing anything. But also, I wanted to talk about the game, so it's not like I'm the news over here. The fuck was that? I'm not the press, I'm just a dude that makes profoundly irresponsible life decisions. It's hard to describe the story without delving into gameplay because this game is a narrative puzzle. So to briefly sum up the premise and the first few beats of it, this game takes place in 1807. A ship called the Obra Dinn shows up in England, once meant to journey around the Cape of Good Hope to trade goods or whatever excuse you make to get in a floating sea coffin. It instead went missing for 6 years. The East India Company sends an insurance adjuster out to the empty vessel in order to determine what happened to the ship's crew. To aid you in this task, you are provided with a log, wherein you'll find a manifest of the ship's crew, a drawing of the crew by an artist who was traveling with them, some other information like nautical terms and rankings, and the rest of the book is blank, to be filled in as you uncover more. Oh, and you have a magic time travel clock called the Memento Mortem that, when used in the presence of a corpse, will propel you back in time to the moment that person died in order to gather information. This is not a game that will bend over backwards trying to explain its world and the mechanics of it. It's intentionally vague and left up to interpretation. So its more mystical elements are not really put under a microscope. These are just things that happen, you know? Stuff happens, you see it, you move on, you got a job to do.
Looks very good. On the whole,
The first corpse we find lies at the doorway of the captain's quarters, and this memory depicts 2 crew members trying to break in until the doors open and one is shot through the neck. Once this moment is logged in your book, we see that this is the end of the Obra Dinn story. This last skirmish between the captain and the handful of survivors is the end of the ship's journey. Well over 50 people are gone for various reasons, and all that's left is a dejected captain and a couple of people that really want him dead. So the first chunk of story we get is pretty bleak, and given that the way we chip away at the story is entirely driven by death, it doesn't really let up with gruesome imagery and infighting leading to violence. What's odd is that beyond this moment, the game rarely feels as bleak and depressing as its story truly is. The atmosphere and presentation of it is one of a light-hearted retro adventure game that maintains this almost cheerful and fun tone despite people being executed and plotting mutinies and dying of foreign illnesses. The meta premise is unavoidably darkly comedic. I mean, you are shown these harrowing, violent deaths, and instead of trying to course correct things or help in some manner, Your only function is to jot them down so the right person gets an appropriate sum of money, assuming they didn't break some sort of agreement or law aboard the ship, which a good amount of them did. Moving around in time, we get little scraps of information about the crew, their relationships, and the many hardships they endure before the end, which we soon learn was not solely the result of their predictable maritime drama. You know, stolen coconuts or some shit. Whatever them boys did out there in the ocean. It is quickly and abruptly shown that a number of surreal and supernatural events played a substantial role in the fate of the Obra Dinn. Some classic pieces of nautical folklore make an appearance, and I think what makes them interesting, and not entirely campy, is how straight it's played. Like, it seems horrific. Not only do they just devastate the crew's ranks, the chaos and confusion of their appearance causes many to die accidentally, some get caught in the crossfire, others use this distraction to carry out their own nefarious plans. To be honest, there isn't much here as far as writing. The story that we see is really minimal and bare bones, and up to you to fill in the blanks. The spectacle and inventiveness of it all comes down to how we learn it, which is we work it out in our dumb brains, so it feels rewarding when we figure out who this random sailor man was before he got his head blown off. Before every snapshot of death we see, we get a brief clip of audio that leads into the visual. And these are insanely well done and function like a high-quality radio play of sorts.
Last one. Move quick.
Boy, you'll not take the last one.
Oh, look out!
So as well as requiring you to have a keen eye for detail in the frozen memories, I was concentrating really hard during these audio clips, trying to get a sense of orientation, listening for accents, names, languages, inflections. It all seemed important. But I'm talking about the gameplay now. I fucked up. So yeah, with every body you find, you create a new page in the book, and you need to figure out who this person is, what was their fate, if they died, who killed them, and how. You can cycle through a pretty extensive list of possible deaths to find the most fitting one. I get the sense that they tried to be forgiving with conceptually similar deaths, but I did come across a few instances of being exasperated that one I chose wasn't correct. That someone was struck and not clubbed, and shit like that. Or spiked instead of speared. These occasions were rare though, and I like that in order to discourage using trial and error to solve things, you get answers right in groups of 3. So you'd have to correctly determine the fate of 3 people before they are entered into the book in ink. It's not like trial and error won't factor in at some point. As some of the characters have such sparse information to work with, you will sort of have to assume, well, this guy is a top man who shows up like twice and both times he's up in the rigging, so he's probably one of the 3 I haven't identified, and I haven't seen him since this chapter, so he probably fell overboard and drowned or something. And on more than one occasion, a guess like that paid off, though these successes did not make me feel nearly as smart. You won't be handed obvious bits of exposition, like a letter referring to someone by name. The manifest and drawing of the crew already give you much more information than I initially anticipated. I mean, going into this, I expected the developer to troll me with misdirects and red herrings, but the logic of it is pretty straightforward. If you're trying to figure out who this guy is, for example, well, he's standing next to the captain, and they kind of give you the captain. And he has a similarly extravagant hat, so he's probably close in ranking to him. The game's not going to trick you when the answer seems obvious. I'm just letting you know because that was my first impression, but I greet most things with mistrust. Ha! Nice try, the government. Right-clicking on a character reveals their location on the drawing, and pressing Shift will open the book to their page, where you can bookmark their appearances and take a crack at solving their fate. A lot of this game felt really satisfying to unravel, and I was genuinely intrigued by the narrative of it. I wanted to keep moving forward, even though I knew I should slow down and backtrack and make sure I absorbed all I could. I think therein lies most of my complaints. While the presentation is pleasant, if you feel like you're hitting a wall and slowing down, you really feel it. It feels like a dead stop. and it's not as easy as it should be to navigate through previous memories. If you'd like to revisit an older memory, you'd need to track down where that initial corpse was, slowly plod over there, use the watch, and if the memory was of someone who died in that memory, you have to go over and find that corpse, then look around for a door to exit back to reality. I feel like that could have been relegated to just touching the picture in your book or something. It's something that required less backtracking. I also kind of wish they would just initially let you leave the scene of your own accord. Instead, you are shown this intense tableau and given a good 20 seconds to inspect it before it iris wipes out, and you have to move on to the next body until you've seen every death in the chapter. It seems odd to initially only give you a few moments and then kick you out. This caused a lot of awkward pacing that did lead to some less than stimulating low points. Initially, I'd wanted to complain that, well, I would have liked a more rich, coherent plot, but in the past couple days I've been, well, eating a lot of 7-Eleven donuts.
I'm hungry!
But also just sort of reflecting on my time playing Return of the Obra Dinn. And ultimately, I was invested, I was interested, I got the sense of an arc, there was a lasting mystery to the pieces of the story we don't see, but it's not really a story that's going to pay off as a singular narrative, so much as giving you a series of smaller payoffs. So, wait, I'm talking about the story again. So I say that, and yet I spent so much time meticulously staring at these people that my relationship with them changed. When I first started, I was just lazily taking stock in my head, people's appearances. Oh, guy with tattoos jumps down to the deck and helps out Turban Man. I'm not going to elaborate on the level of racism that led to, but towards the end, I was on a first-name basis with nearly 60 people. It's a real interesting experience. Oh, f*** me in the oh yeah, totally. It's like, nobody talks about that game anymore. Thanks for the comment. Yeah, it's a real interesting experiment with storytelling that elevates a really thin premise into something immersive and charming. But the parts it leaves up to you can often feel like the story's heart. I mean, the foundation of the gameplay requires you to focus on mundane bureaucratic facts. So though we can sometimes infer something miraculous, emotional, or meaningful is happening, we are being trained to ignore it. I'm assuming there was some rationale behind this, that this was somehow the point, the experiment, as this Lucas Pope guy seems to be a real bright feller. But it creates a really odd clash to me that I still don't fully know how I feel about. Oh, I thought I'd have more. Look at this! Have you been looking at this the whole time? This looks nuts! I think the game's visual style is in itself a triumph. It's creative and gorgeous and somehow simultaneously nostalgic but modern, allowing you to walk through fully 3D environments rendered in the 1-bit style of early Macintosh and IBM games. I've seen a few people claim that this minimal monochromatic look ended up hurting their eyes, and all I gotta say to that is, get better eyes! This game looks amazing. It's a very weird form of wish fulfillment. Seeing something from childhood spring to life and seem tactile and real. Everything moves so smoothly like it's a rotoscoped film. It's a shame there wasn't more displays of actual animation. I can't imagine the process of pulling this off was easy to do. And it seems appropriate that I think it's the most successful thing about this game, and it was the genesis of the idea. The game started with this aesthetic, and then a game was retrofitted to inhabit it. Every memory you enter feels so vibrant and lively despite being more or less a still image you hover a magnifying glass over. It's a bold decision that only an indie game could confidently attempt with as much passion put into it. Sound design and voice acting are both fantastic, and since most of the times they are present you can't see what's happening, they aren't tethered to a cutscene or anything, so they really come to life with realistic Foley work and intense performances, making some of the more gruesome moments all the more horrifying. Music is even more appropriate to the retro pastiche, consisting of somber, dirge-like, and decidedly piratey compositions that fill every scene with a looming dread. Every chapter has its own song, and you'll no doubt hear them a lot. There's also a really enjoyable, jaunty quality to them, almost entirely as a result of their production. It is as nostalgia-inducing, if not more, than the visuals. I especially love how dialogue and instruction is accompanied by little musical stings. I don't have a single criticism of this soundtrack, other than I wish tracks were longer than 2.5 minutes. Because once they play out, the undeniably well-done sea ambience can only entertain me so much. The track that plays as the ship is stormed by crab-mounted spearmen has this really infectious melody played on ghostly bells that has been stuck looping in my head through nearly every waking moment since. This is the mood I wake up in, one that suggests I am arrogantly sailing towards a spectacular demise that nobody will remember. Return of the Obra Dinn is a wonderful experience. I think it does exactly what indie games should, but often lose sight of doing. Experiment. Wring something personal and passionate out of raw talent. This filled a void that I didn't know I had. I have a lot of voids, and this filled one of the less dad-shaped ones. It has a really fun and simple story that you piece together with challenging and rewarding gameplay. It feels good thinking you could possibly be smart. It is as genuine a detective experience as you're gonna find out there. Because all the work is done up here. I'm pointing to my head, you can't see that. I don't know why I did that. But yeah, it's up here. It's not with X-ray vision and quest markers. You have to figure it out with what limited information you can find and your own deductive reasoning. It has a fantastic soundtrack. It has a fantastic soundtrack and sound design. Oh, but those fucking creaky wood noises? Out of this world, but also like fuck boats. Like most games, I can find things to criticize. I mean, I feel like the overarching complaint I have is that the game presents this clever detective experience but doesn't marry it to something that moves or motivates me. My reasoning is mostly that I want to best the game, and those aren't the experiences I value the most. And yeah, I could totally see how it would work for somebody else. I definitely saw moments where I'm like, oh, that's a bummer. Like, that guy seemed like a cool dude before he blew up. That guy looks like he probably, loved his kids before Crab cut his head off. But it just wasn't enough for me. Saying that out loud, it makes me sound kind of greedy. And I'll certainly reflect on that later. Storytelling is important to me, and I understand this creator has already cornered the market of having mundane paperwork convey depth and narrative, but I don't know how much that trick works on me. In a dream scenario, I would love to see this idea bigger and more meaningful. I want to take part in it. I want to be embedded in the story with characters that I care about for reasons beyond their names and who murdered them. I'd love elements of this gameplay to be involved, but maybe not as the sole means of playing the game. Maybe there could be challenges like this, but alongside other things to do. I'm not even asking to be part of big action set pieces. I just want to be doing more. I want to be consuming more story, consuming more character. A lot is done with very little, but I just want a little bit more. Fuck! Yeah. Ooh, that went bad a couple days ago. I understand that's not the intention, and never was really. This is the game it was meant to be, but I think that's what impresses and excites me more than this game's execution. It's the wellspring of creativity and heart behind it. For the past couple years, the video game industry, both AAA and indie, seem to be in a gold rush. Seeing one person find some successful, monetizable idea, and a gang of copycats descend on it, repurposing it in the hopes that they will find similar success. And I for fuck's cunt! I will do that one. That's a good idea. I will absolutely do that one. Thank you for that comment. Appreciate you. I have utmost respect for a game that was created entirely to try something new. That shows how many veins are left untapped if we could all just stop beating the same long depleted one. Alright, I think I can live with that. I think that'll be fine.